The fact that you are looking at this screen right now is not something I would call coincidence. In my years of studying human beings, truly studying them, not merely cataloging their pathologies, I came to believe that we are drawn towards certain experiences precisely when we are ready to receive them. You may have been scrolling idly, filling time, moving through the surface of your day without direction. But something stopped you here, and I want you to consider, seriously consider, that this moment of pause is itself a form of intelligence, your own deeper intelligence at work. Perhaps you have been on your phone since morning. Perhaps you are exhausted from a long day and clicking through videos without intention. But this one is different, and some part of you already knows that, because what brought you here was not randomness, it was readiness. There is a principle I have thought about deeply throughout my career. The idea that meaningful encounters happen when the person is internally prepared for them. When the inner life has reached a certain pressure point, the outer world begins to reflect it back. And what you are experiencing right now, this sense that these words are speaking to something real inside you, is not magic. It is the natural consequence of a self that has been quietly preparing for this moment of recognition. You are on the edge of change, and you may not yet fully know it. Let me ask you something, and I want you to answer it honestly. Not for me, but for yourself. Do you feel lately that something has shifted inside you? That the routines and roles which once gave you a sense of purpose now feel somehow hollow? That the things which used to excite you have lost their color, their charge, their meaning? That even in the company of other people, you feel a strange distance, as though you are speaking a language slightly different from everyone around you? If any part of you is nodding, then I want you to hear what I am about to say with your full attention. You are not broken, you are not failing. What you are experiencing is something I spent the better part of my career trying to name and to understand. You are standing at the threshold of growth. And growth, in its early stages, does not feel like expansion. It feels like disorientation. It feels like loneliness. It feels like the loss of ground beneath your feet. Most people live what I can only describe as a defended life. They construct walls not out of stone, but out of habit, expectation, and social approval. They become what their families needed them to be, what their culture rewarded them for being, what was safe and legible to the world around them. And for a while, sometimes for decades, this works. The self that was built for survival passes as the self that is real, but it is not. Beneath that constructed identity, the authentic human being continues to exist, muffled but not extinguished, waiting with extraordinary patience for permission to emerge. And nobody tells you how isolating that waiting feels. Nobody prepares you for the particular loneliness of being a person who is becoming, surrounded by people who are simply continuing. What you are feeling right now, that restlessness, that quiet dissatisfaction, those questions without tidy answers, this is not a malfunction. This is the signal that the constructed self has reached the edge of what it can offer you, and the deeper self, the real self, is beginning to press forward. In my hierarchy of needs, I describe this movement as the drive towards self-actualization. But that phrase, as clinical as it sounds, does not capture the experience of it from the inside. From the inside, it feels like loss before it feels like gain. It feels like grief before it feels like liberation, because the self you built to survive must, in some sense, be released before the self you were always capable of becoming can finally breathe. Now I want you to understand something about the shape of a human life. There are people who live it as a straight line: birth, education, work, family, old age. A life organized entirely around external milestones, external expectations, external definitions of success. And there is nothing wrong with that life, as far as it goes. But there are others, and I believe you are among them, whose life moves not in a straight line, but in a spiral. Each turn of the spiral brings them deeper, more conscious, more awake. Each revolution is more painful than the last, and also more freeing. And right now, you are at one of those critical turning points. The question before you is not a small one. Will you ascend to a new level of your own becoming? Or will you retreat into the familiar loop of the old self, the one that feels safe precisely because you already know its dimensions? I want to be honest with you about what the drive toward growth asks of us. It is not comfortable. The part of us that resists change, what we might call the defensive self, the ego in its most rigid form, does not surrender willingly. It tells you that the unfamiliar is dangerous. It tells you that what you cannot yet see cannot be trusted. It fills you with doubt and with fear, and it does this not out of malice, but out of a misguided sense of protection. It is trying to keep you safe, but it is keeping you safe inside a cage that has grown too small for who you are becoming. And the question I want to ask you is this: What if the life waiting for you on the other side of your own transformation is more beautiful, more peaceful, more genuinely alive than anything the defended self can offer? Would you still choose to stay where you are? Would you still let fear make that decision for you? One of the most important observations I made in studying psychologically healthy, fully realized human beings was this. They saw reality clearly, not through the distorted lens of what they wished were true, or what they feared, or what they had been told. They looked at the world, and at themselves, with an honest and courageous directness. They had what I called the ability to perceive freshly, to see without the filters of habit and anxiety. And this capacity, this clear seeing, begins with looking inward. It begins with the willingness to ask, what is actually happening inside me? What do I actually feel, actually need, actually value? Beneath the performance, beneath the role, beneath the carefully maintained surface of an acceptable life. Look around you right now. Your work, your home, your relationships, your daily routines. From the outside, perhaps everything appears normal, stable, unchanged. But inside, something is breaking open. Inside, something is waking up. And that waking is disturbing precisely because it carries responsibility with it. To wake up is to no longer be able to say you did not know. To wake up is to move from being the passive recipient of your own life to being its active creator. And that is a profound shift, because as long as we remain unconscious of the forces shaping us, we can always say, this happened to me. But once we truly see, we must reckon with our own agency, and that reckoning is simultaneously the most frightening and the most liberating moment in a human life. I want to speak about something that I think is happening in the broader world as well, because I do not believe the individual exists in isolation from the cultural moment they inhabit. We are living through a period of extraordinary disruption. Old structures, social, political, economic, psychological, are becoming unstable. And this is not only a crisis, it is also an invitation. Because when the familiar frameworks begin to dissolve, human beings are forced to ask deeper questions. They are forced to look for meaning that is not provided by the system, but generated from within. And this, precisely this, is the moment when genuine human development becomes possible on a wide scale. You are living through such a moment personally, and what is happening inside you mirrors something that is happening collectively. An old way of being is reaching its end. A new one is trying to be born. This new way of being begins with something I can only call a great awakening of self-awareness. Many of the things you were taught about who you should be, what you should want, how a successful life should look, you will begin to recognize as inherited rather than chosen. The patterns that were handed to you will start to become visible as patterns, rather than as simply the way things are. And once they are visible, once you can see the shape of the conditioning you have lived inside, you will have the possibility of choosing differently, of living more deliberately, of becoming, perhaps for the first time in your adult life, the author of your own story, rather than a character in someone else's. This is not a gift that is given to everyone. Not because some people are more deserving than others, but because not everyone reaches the moment of readiness. And if this is reaching you now, it is because something in you has been preparing for it. Something in you has already been asking the questions that make this recognition possible. You have earned this moment through the accumulated weight of your own unresolved longing. And now that it is here, what you do with it matters enormously. There are two broad phases to a human life, psychologically speaking. In the first phase, we build. We construct an identity, accumulate roles, learn to function in the social world. We become the professional, the partner, the parent, the son, or the daughter. These roles are not false. They are necessary. They serve a genuine purpose, but they are not the whole of who you are. Somewhere around the middle of life, sometimes earlier, often triggered by a significant loss or crisis, the second phase begins to announce itself. The soul, if I can use that word in a purely psychological sense, begins to ask a different set of questions. Not what do I need to achieve, but who am I beneath my achievements? Not what does the world need from me, but what does my own deepest nature require? Not whose life am I performing, but is this actually my life? These questions are frightening. I know that. I watched it in the faces of the people I worked with and studied, because to take those questions seriously means that something may need to change. Perhaps a relationship that is no longer honest. Perhaps a career that was chosen for security rather than meaning. Perhaps a version of yourself that was built to please people who are no longer even watching. And we human beings are profoundly resistant to releasing what we know, even when what we know is making us miserable. Because the known, however painful, is at least predictable. And the unknown feels like chaos. But here is what I came to understand through decades of observation. Chaos is not the enemy of growth. Chaos is its precondition. Before a new order can emerge, the old one must dissolve. Before the person you are becoming can take shape, the person you have been must loosen its grip. And that loosening, that uncertain, uncomfortable, necessary period of not yet knowing who you are becoming, is not a breakdown. It is a reorganization. It is your inner world rebuilding itself at a higher level of complexity and aliveness. Some of this reorganization happens quietly beneath the surface. You may experience it as a vague depression, a sense of being stuck, a feeling of circling in patterns you cannot seem to break. I want to say clearly, this experience, uncomfortable as it is not pathological. It is developmental. It is what happens when a human being is on the verge of genuine change and has not yet found the language or the courage or the support to move through it. In this moment, right now, these words, I hope they can serve as a kind of permission. Permission to take your own inner life seriously. Permission to stop pretending that the surface of things is all there is. Permission to begin the real work. Now I want to speak about something I consider central to psychological growth, and it is something that makes many people uncomfortable. I'm talking about the parts of ourselves we have rejected. In every human being I ever studied, I found that alongside the qualities they claimed and presented to the world, there existed other qualities, equally human, equally real, that had been suppressed, denied, pushed underground. Anger, ambition, need, desire, the wish to be seen, the fear of being abandoned, the hunger for more than what life has so far offered. These are not shameful things, but most of us were taught in one way or another that certain feelings were unacceptable, that certain needs were too much, that certain aspects of our authentic experience had to be hidden in order to be loved, in order to belong, in order to survive. And so we hid them. We became very good at hiding them, even from ourselves, but they did not disappear. They simply went underground. And from underground, they continued to shape our choices, our relationships, our patterns, without our awareness, without our consent, without our understanding. The healthiest human beings I ever encountered were not the ones who had eliminated these difficult inner forces. They were the ones who had made peace with them, who had looked honestly at their own darkness, not to wallow in it, not to be defined by it, but to understand it, to integrate it, to make it conscious. Because what is conscious can be chosen. What is unconscious simply happens to you. And this is the essential insight I want you to carry forward. The parts of yourself you most resist knowing are very often the parts that hold the most energy. The anger you have spent years suppressing, made conscious, becomes the capacity to set boundaries, to stand for what matters, to refuse to be diminished. The need you have been ashamed of, acknowledged and understood, becomes the ability to receive love, to ask for help, to be genuinely close to another human being. The ambition you have been hiding, brought into the light, becomes the engine of a life genuinely directed toward your own highest potential. Here is something I found to be consistently true. We are most disturbed by qualities in other people that we have refused to acknowledge in ourselves. When another person's behavior provokes in you a reaction that seems disproportionate, when their self-interest or their neediness or their confidence strikes you as almost unbearable, pay attention to that. Not to judge them, but to learn something about yourself. Because the qualities that most reliably trigger us are very often the qualities we have most thoroughly exiled from our own self-concept. If someone's selfishness fills you with contempt, ask yourself, where in my own life have I been taught that my needs don't matter? If someone's arrogance enrages you, consider, where have I learned to make myself small, to undervalue my own worth? This is not a comfortable line of inquiry, but it is one of the most direct paths toward genuine self-knowledge available to us. And I want to say something critical here, because I have watched people misuse this kind of insight. The recognition of your own rejected qualities is not an occasion for self-condemnation. It is an invitation to self-understanding. When you see a part of yourself that has been living in the shadows, the task is not to punish yourself for its existence. The task is to bring it into the light, to look at it with curiosity rather than shame, to ask, what is this part of me trying to protect? What does it need? How can I work with it consciously rather than being driven by it unconsciously? Because darkness is not evil. Darkness is simply the absence of awareness. When you shine the light of your own honest attention into those inner corners, what was dark becomes visible, and what is visible can be integrated, and what is integrated becomes strength. Now let me bring you to what I consider the heart of everything I have spent my life studying. Behind all the roles you play, beneath all the adaptations you have made, beyond the constructed self that has served you in the social world, there is something that I am convinced is present in every human being. A core, a genuine self, Not a self that needs to be built or earned or proven. A self that simply is. That has always been. That was present before the world began shaping you, and that continues to exist beneath all the shaping. In my work on self-actualization, I was really describing the process of returning to this core, of peeling away what is not genuinely you until what remains is unmistakably, irreducibly you. And I want to be very clear. You are not working toward becoming someone new. You are working toward becoming more fully who you already are, at the deepest level. You are not building yourself. You are uncovering yourself, like a sculptor who does not add to the stone, but removes everything that is not the figure already waiting inside it. But I will not pretend this uncovering is simple. It is the most demanding work a human being can undertake, because the world will not always support it. Some of the people in your life have a vested interest in the version of you that they know. Some of the structures you have built your life around are organized around the constructed self, not the real one. When you begin to change, when you begin to speak more honestly, to choose more authentically, to refuse the roles that no longer fit, there will be friction, there will be resistance, from others and from the part of yourself that fears loss. And the fear is not irrational. Change does involve loss. Becoming more yourself will sometimes mean being less comfortable. It will sometimes mean being less understood, at least temporarily. But I want to say to you, with the full conviction of everything I have learned, the cost of not becoming yourself is far higher. The cost of the unlived life, the life shaped entirely by fear and accommodation and the need for approval, is measured in a kind of slow, quiet suffering that never fully declares itself, but never fully goes away. I want to give you something practical, something you can begin today. I'm asking you to give yourself 15 minutes of genuine stillness each day, not 15 minutes of passive distraction. 15 minutes of conscious, undistracted presence with your own inner experience. No phone, no music, no input of any kind, just you, and whatever arises when you stop moving away from yourself. I will warn you, at first, it will be deeply uncomfortable. The thoughts you have been outrunning will surface, the feelings you have filed away will return with some force. The memories and regrets and longings and fears that you have been managing through constant activity will make themselves known, and every part of your defensive self will urge you to stop, to check your phone, to find something more productive to do. I am asking you to stay, to simply observe what arises without judging it, without trying to fix it, without trying to force it into meaning. Just watch. Just be present with what is actually alive in you. This practice, simple as it sounds, is one of the most powerful things a human being can do, because the willingness to be present with your own inner life without fleeing it is the foundation of self-knowledge, and self-knowledge is the foundation of everything else. As you commit to this kind of inner honesty, you will begin to notice something interesting happening in your external life as well. The right opportunities will begin to appear. The right conversations will arise at the right moments. The book that speaks to exactly what you are working through will find its way into your hands. I do not say this mystically. I say it because when you become more genuinely yourself, when your attention is sharper, your self-awareness clearer, your values more honestly known to you, you begin to notice things that were always there, but that you were not prepared to see. Your inner alignment changes what you are capable of perceiving, and what you perceive changes what becomes possible. This is not magic. This is the natural consequence of psychological growth, and it is available to you, beginning now. I want to speak now about what I consider the ultimate purpose of all this inner work, because I have watched people pursue personal development as though it were a performance, as though the goal were to present a more impressive, more polished, more spiritually sophisticated version of themselves to the world. And I want to say clearly, that is not what I mean. The goal is not to become a better performance. The goal is to become complete, whole, to hold within yourself the full range of what it means to be human. The strength and the vulnerability, the clarity and the confusion, the love and the anger, the certainty and the doubt, and to hold all of it consciously, without shame, without suppression, with the kind of honest self-acceptance that makes genuine relationship with others finally possible. I called this the state of psychological health. And what characterized the psychologically healthy people I studied more than anything else was not their achievement. It was their completeness, their willingness to be fully, honestly, unapologetically themselves. And here is what I found to be extraordinary about that completeness. It is contagious, not in any mystical sense, but in the most straightforward human sense. When you are genuinely yourself, when the life you live on the outside matches the truth you carry on the inside, you give permission to the people around you to be more genuinely themselves as well. Not through lectures, not through advice, not through the performance of wisdom, but simply through the unmistakable quality of your presence. The most realized human beings I ever encountered did not teach primarily through what they said. They taught through what they were. And that is the promise waiting for you on the other side of this work. Not just a better life for yourself, a different quality of presence in the world, a different kind of impact on the people you love. So let me also say this about the shadow. Those parts of yourself you have spent years refusing to see. If you want to truly know yourself, you must be willing to look honestly at what disturbs you most deeply about your own behavior. You must be willing to ask, where am I not living in integrity? Where am I performing rather than being? Where am I avoiding a truth I already know? These questions are not comfortable, but they are the precise questions that psychological growth requires. And when you bring your honest attention to them, not to condemn yourself, but to understand yourself, something genuinely remarkable happens. The energy that has been locked up in the effort of not seeing becomes available. The vitality that has been consumed by the maintenance of illusion is freed, and you become, quite suddenly, more alive than you have been in years. Now I want to say something I consider perhaps the most important thing I will offer you today. I want to say it simply because it deserves to be said simply. You are not incomplete. I know the world has worked very hard to convince you otherwise, that you need more achievements, more credentials, more external validation, more proof of worth before you can consider yourself enough. But this is, I believe, one of the most damaging lies of modern culture. You were born with an inherent capacity for growth, for love, for meaning, for wonder, for connection. These are not things you must earn. They are things you must uncover. The layers of conditioning, the years of learned smallness, the accumulated adaptations of a life lived in response to other people's needs and fears and expectations. These are what stand between you and the direct experience of your own wholeness. The work is not addition. The work is subtraction. It is removing, layer by careful layer, what is not truly you, until what remains is undeniably, beautifully, irreducibly you. I spent my career arguing against a psychology that was obsessed with what was wrong with human beings. I wanted to study what was right, what was possible, what the heights of human experience looked like, and what allowed some people to reach them. And what I found, again and again, was that the people living at the highest levels of human functioning were not exceptional in the ways the world tends to measure. They were not always the most accomplished, or the most recognized, or the most conventionally successful, but they shared something that I came to regard as the most important quality a human being can develop. They knew who they were, not perfectly, not completely, but honestly. They had done the work of looking inward, of confronting what was difficult, of integrating what was real, and of building a life that was genuinely theirs. And in knowing themselves, they were able to meet the world, and the people in it, with a quality of presence and openness and genuine care that I found deeply moving every single time I encountered it. That is what is available to you, not someday, beginning now, not after you have solved all your problems or resolved all your contradictions or achieved all the things you have been told will finally make you acceptable. Now, as you are, with everything that is unfinished and unresolved and uncertain within you, because the journey toward genuine selfhood does not begin from a place of completion. It begins from exactly where you are, and where you are right now, with all your questions and your restlessness and your quiet longing for something more real. This is precisely the right place to begin. What you are being called toward is not a project with an end date. Psychological growth does not conclude. There is no moment at which you will be able to say, I am finished. I am fully actualized. The work is done. What there is, instead, is a direction, a way of orienting yourself toward your own inner life that you can choose again and again, day after day, for the rest of your life. And I want to say, because I believe it with everything I know, that choosing this direction is the most worthwhile thing you can do with the time you have. Not because it will make you comfortable. It will not always. Not because it will make you popular. It may not, but because it will make you real. And being real, being genuinely, honestly, fully alive, is the deepest form of respect you can offer to the extraordinary fact of your own existence. You felt something when you arrived here today. Some recognition, some resonance, some part of you that said, yes, this is true. I want you to honor that. I want you to take it seriously, not as a passing feeling, but as like information, as data about who you are and what you are ready for. Because that quiet inner knowing, that impulse toward more honesty, more depth, more authentic living, that is not noise. That is the signal. That is the voice of your own highest potential, making itself known. The only question that remains is whether you are willing to listen, whether you are willing to respond not with words, but with the daily, ongoing, courageous act of choosing to know yourself more honestly than you did yesterday. The capacity is yours. It has always been yours. And the moment, this moment, is exactly right.